Hi, I'm Chelsea, a postpartum doula, certified pediatric sleep consultant, and mama to one toddler and one on the way. And today I'm sharing with you my webinar, How to Get Your Sleep Back on Track After a Regression. And in this webinar, we'll cover everything from why sleep regressions happen, when they happen, what you can do to get through it and overcome it, or recover from one after it's already happened. And I'll talk to you about my 3 pillars of sleep. And these are kind of just the basics of building those good independent sleep habits, as well as 3 of my go-to not cry it out sleep training methods. I hope you enjoy. Here for our masterclass, How to Get Your Sleep Back on Track After a Regression. And I'm super excited to be offering this masterclass. I've been wanting to offer a free webinar because I know what it feels like to be either in the middle of a sleep regression and not know what to do or how to handle it, or to have been through one recently and picked up all these habits that maybe you didn't want to do, but you just have to get through it somehow. And there's nothing wrong with that. So hopefully if you're in one of those situations, you'll be able to get some good tips today. And yeah, also feel free to unmute and ask a question if you want to as we go along. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Chelsea. I'm mama to an almost 3-year-old girl, and we have a baby boy on the way due at the end of May here. I am a postpartum doula and a sleep consultant, and I spent 9 years teaching elementary music. I've just loved working with families for as long as I can remember. I started babysitting at a really young age and was a mother's helper for twin newborns when I was in 8th grade. So that's kind of when I started to fall in love with babies. And I just have loved watching kiddos grow up and help wherever I can for a really long time. And yeah, I'm passionate about helping families achieve their sleep goals so they don't miss out on the good stuff in parenting, because it's so hard to show up the way you want to as a parent when you're sleep deprived. So here's kind of an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to learn about sleep regressions and why they happen, what we can do about them. And we'll kind of talk about these 3 pillars of sleep. And I'll keep referring to those throughout our time together. And then we'll talk about whether or not to sleep train your baby and some different things you might consider when you're making that decision, setting the stage for sleep success. And then I'll go through 3 sleep training options at the end, and we'll finish up with a question and answer time. All right, so let's jump in. So if you're here, I'm guessing you've recognized some signs of a sleep regression for your baby or your toddler. And this can look like any number of sleep troubles, but the difference between a sleep regression and more of these chronic sleep struggles that I tend to help my clients with is that these seem to come out of nowhere. And you might have had a baby who was sleeping really, really well through the night or getting nice long stretches at night. And then all of a sudden they're up every half hour, every hour, every 2 hours. And you can't tell if they're hungry or if they need comfort, or you just don't know what's going on. Sometimes they resolve on their own, but sometimes when they happen, it just kind of blows up all the good things you had with your sleep routine going before. And it can be really frustrating. So why do they happen? Researchers still don't know exactly what causes sleep regressions, but they think that they're primarily related to developmental milestones. And I think of sleep disruptions like travel or illness or teething kind of in the same bucket as I think about sleep regressions. They are different, but they act the same, they look the same, and they have the same effect. So we'll be talking about all the things that I'm talking about with sleep regressions today. You can also address issues like sleep disruptions in the same way. So the reason the theories that researchers have is that they happen because of developmental milestones, because your baby is about to hit that developmental milestone. Um, it could happen if your baby's ready to drop a nap, or if there's an interruption in the normal routine, like I just mentioned. And then the 4-month sleep regression, I'm going to talk about that separately in just a minute because it's kind of like the big doozy of all the sleep regressions. And that one actually involves some different, like the way your baby sleeps is totally reorganizing and shifting. All right, so when do they happen? If your baby is older, you might feel like you've been going through sleep regressions since they hit 4 months old. And like I mentioned earlier, sleep regressions are linked to developmental milestones. So, for example, your baby might be learning to roll at around 4 months, or maybe at 6 months, they're starting to sit up on their own, or they're crawling at 8 months, or walking at 12 months, or having a big language explosion at 18 months. And so these are kind of like, if you Google when do sleep regressions happen, these are kind of the ages that come up: 4, 6, 8, 12 months, 18 months, and 2 years. But really, they can happen anytime. And that's because every baby develops on a different timeline. And so one baby might be learning to roll at 3 months, and another baby might be starting to roll at 5 months. And that same developmental milestone is happening at a different time, but it will have the same effect. It's not like a magic, like your baby turns 4 months old and all of a sudden it's a sleep regression, although that is often what it feels like. So I did specifically want to touch on the 4-month regression because, yeah, it's kind of the big one. And it tends to be the one that causes problems long term. Like I just had a discovery call today with a mama whose baby is almost 8 months. And she said the baby was sleeping great until 4 months. And then ever since then, so that's 4 months of being sleep deprived. And, they were getting these really nice long stretches, and now everything's falling apart. So, or it started to fall apart at 4 months and is still 4 months later a real struggle. So here's what's going on during the 4-month regression. The big milestone is that your baby might be learning to roll. And because of that, you might be dropping the swaddle around this time if you've been swaddling your baby. So those are two things that are totally messing with sleep in the first place. And then on top of that, your tiny little newborn is now reorganizing their sleep cycles to more of an adult sleep cycle structure. So newborns have just 2 sleep cycles: quiet and active. And their active sleep is like our REM sleep cycle, and their quiet sleep is more of a deep sleep. And right around 4 months, those start to shift, and the quiet sleep breaks down into these 4 different levels of varying deep sleep. And then the active sleep turns into REM sleep. So all of that combined makes for a really tough situation at 4 months. And sometimes it's brief and people barely notice it, and sometimes it can really cause some big problems. So what can you do to get through, whether it's a 4-month regression, whether you're recovering from the 4-month regression, or any other sleep regression or sleep disruption? There are these 3 things in sleep that I call the 3 pillars of sleep. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. But these are the things that I always come back to when I'm talking to a client, when I'm helping a friend, or anytime someone's like, help me with sleep. These are the 3 things that I come back to before I even start thinking about a sleep training method. We're also going to talk about some daytime schedule factors to keep in mind. We'll talk about whether or not to sleep train, We'll talk about the power of a good bedtime routine. And then finally, I'll go through 3 of my go-to sleep training options for you. So here are the 3 pillars of sleep, and I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because we're going to keep talking about them as we go. So the first one is safe sleep and the general sleep environment. So if you're like I was when my daughter was little, you might be sick of hearing about safe sleep, but as a sleep consultant, I feel like it's important to just mention that we want our babies to be as safe as possible when they're sleeping, and that means that we're putting them alone in their crib and on their back. And if they roll, once you put them on their back, if they roll to their tummy, that's totally fine. But we will always want to put them on their back and alone in their crib. Now, if you've fallen into co-sleeping or if you're choosing to co-sleep, that is your choice. But I just always want to mention safe sleep. And if you are co-sleeping, I want to encourage you to look up the Safe Sleep 7 for co-sleeping. But besides the safe sleep, in terms of a sleep environment, most babies do really well with a really, really dark room. So we're talking about for nighttime sleep and for naps. Obviously, this is easier at nighttime, but it is still important at nap time as well. So if your baby's struggling with sleep, you can first of all check, do you have a nightlight in there? Because it's probably not necessary. If you're going in for feedings or whatever, obviously it's good to have a dim light so you don't get hurt. But when the baby is just supposed to be sleeping, try to get that room as dark as you can. And the same for naps. I love to have like blackout curtains in there when possible. And it is good, I think, to have some light coming in just to help with the circadian rhythm and everything. But a dark room really will help cue your baby that it's time to sleep. And then the temperature of the room really matters as well. So the kind of general recommendation for a baby's room temperature is 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And if, like, I know we keep our house a lot cooler than that at night because we're more comfortable and we want to save money on our heating bill and stuff like that. So if you're kind of outside of that range, just double check, do a Google search for TOD or thermal overall grade. And that will make some suggestions about how to dress your baby in those more extreme temperatures. So like above 72 degrees or below 68 degrees. And then finally, white noise. So some people don't like to have their babies use white noise. It might bother the parents or whatever the reason, but I always like to encourage parents to at least give it a try, especially if your baby is still pretty young, because it can be a really good sleep association because once that white noise is on, you don't need to keep going back in there to adjust it. So like we'll talk about sleep associations here coming up next, but if your baby is constantly needing to be nursed to sleep like all the time, or if they need a bottle to fall asleep, or if they need to be rocked to sleep, these are sleep associations. And they're not bad, but they can become unsustainable because babies wake up. We all wake up throughout the night, and babies expect to fall asleep the same way that they fell asleep at bedtime. So if they wake up after an hour in their crib, they expect to get nursed back to sleep. And that's where all these like multiple night wakings come into place. Those night wakings aren't going to go away when your baby can sleep independently, but they will be able to fall back asleep just the way that we do when we wake up in the middle of the night, more often than not. So, excuse me, going back to white noise for a second, if we're replacing, let's say, nursing with white noise, when the baby wakes up and they're kind of using that soothing sound of the white noise to fall asleep instead of being nursed to sleep, that doesn't require you to be in there. So it's kind of it allows them to have that sleep association and kind of leave you out of the picture. So yeah, again, sleep associations is anything that requires you to be, or anything that your baby needs to fall asleep. And these kind of more unsustainable ones like nursing or bottle feeding or rocking or popping that pacifier back in, that was my daughter's. It can feel really overwhelming when every time your baby wakes up, they need that from you. So when we talk about working on independent sleep, whether it's in regression or after regression or just in general, um, we're talking about eliminating these sleep associations. You can still obviously nurse and rock your baby, but it's just going to be a little bit separated from them actually falling asleep. And then the third pillar of sleep for me is the daytime schedule. If your baby is getting too much sleep or not enough sleep, they're going to have a hard time no matter what, whether or not they know how to fall asleep independently. So some of the factors I will encourage you to think about with this daytime schedule is what time are they going to bed and what time are they waking up? Each individual nap length, how long are their wake windows? And a wake window is just the time between sleep. So if it's between waking up for the day and their first nap, or between naps, or between the last nap and going to bed for the night, those are all wake windows. And then total daytime sleep is also a big factor. And the total sleep that your baby's getting in 24 hours. So total daytime sleep is like the total amount of time that they're napping throughout the day. And then total sleep in 24 hours is exactly what it sounds like. So I'm going to put up a slide next here that kind of has all those sleep math numbers for all different ages. So feel free to screenshot this if you want. This is a tool that I use every day, and we'll just kind of zoom through it really quickly here. But 4 to 5 months, at 4 months, your baby might still be taking 4 naps, but typically we're going to see 3 naps. The total nap time should be around 4 hours. Each nap should not be longer than 2 hours. You're going to cap, if your baby's sleeping for an hour and 45 minutes, you're going to make sure they're up by that 2-hour mark. And then the average maximum wake time is going to be about 2 hours for that 4 to 5 months old. And then overall, total sleep in 24 hours is going to be 15 to 15 and a half. And then 6 to 7 months, you might see that third nap going away. Total nap time is going to be 3.5 hours, all the way down until they're down to 1 nap. We're going to cap the nap at 2 hours. Their wake window stretches to almost 3 hours. And then their total number of sleep goes down to 14 and a half hours. And then, yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but all right. A big question that I know that I had when my baby was 6 months old and she hit that 6-month regression really hard. And I personally believe that sleep training is going to get you and your baby where you want to be in terms of sleep in the quickest way and overall without as much stress or tears or worrying as not sleep training if you're having these sleep struggles. But I also fully understand either not being ready to commit or just being kind of like skeptical about sleep training, having hesitations. So I get both sides really, like on a personal level. So I'm just going to talk about first what you can do if you're like, no, I'm not going to sleep train my baby right now, maybe not ever. I'm not ready, I don't want to, whatever the reason is. But these strategies that we're going to talk about also are the first things that I recommend to do before starting a sleep training plan. So they're kind of like, they're just good sleep habits for you and your baby to work on. Okay, so you're always going to come back to these three pillars of sleep because babies develop and their sleep needs are going to change as they grow up. So always start with those three pillars of sleep: their sleep environment, sleep associations, and then their schedule. Next, rhythms and routines. So I want you to think about your day and think about what can you set up in your day-to-day life to promote sleep. Things like time for your baby to move freely, like just put a blanket down on the floor and give them some toys and let them roll around or crawl around or whatever developmental milestone they're working on, give them a chance to practice that. Um, Time outside is huge for everyone. I know when I go outside, I feel a lot better. But for babies, especially, it helps set their little circadian rhythms and solidify it, and all the benefits that we experience as well. Um, Social time is also really important for babies. Time with you, to feel connected, other family members, siblings, friends, bigger kids, tiny babies their own age. Just having that time to connect with other people is really good and can promote sleep as well. Um, Also, how can you add predictability into your day to help your baby recognize patterns to cue them for sleep? And we'll talk about a nap routine and bedtime routine later, but just yeah, thinking about the overall flow of your day. We're not just gonna like go from running around outside to trying to put them down in their crib without any transition time. So building in those transitions and those good sleep associations, that will help them calm down, unwind, relax, and be ready for sleep. And then what opportunities can you give your baby to fall asleep on their own with less support than maybe what you're giving them right now? If you attempt a transfer and they wake up, you can simply just sit next to them or rub their back intermittently until they fall asleep. If you give them an opportunity to fall asleep on their own, they might surprise you. So next time that happens, instead of swooping in immediately and picking them up and rocking them all over again, just see how they do. Give it 5-10 minutes, and give them a chance to fall asleep in a new way with a little bit less support. Another way that I like to implement this idea of giving them opportunities to practice is, can you try to keep an eye out for that perfect sweet spot when your baby is really tired but not overtired, and then put them in their bed awake and calm and happy, and just give them a minute and see what happens. Stay with them or give them a little space, and just observe and see what happens. And that brings me to my next one, which is pause and observe. Whenever they wake up in the middle of the night, I always encourage parents to pause, take a deep breath, maybe take a sip of water, and just see what's going on. What does your baby really need from you in this moment? And my daughter, Callie, she is what I call an avocado baby. And if she is not like the exact right amount of tired, she has a really hard time going to sleep. So if she's a little bit overtired or not quite tired enough, it's like a whole thing to get her to go to sleep. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't spent a lot of time observing and kind of learning her sleep patterns and habits and rhythms and stuff. Okay, so finally, in the same vein, I want you to know your child and prioritize connection. When we're tuned into our baby's cues, their particular cries, their individual sleep needs, and their rhythms, we'll be able to help them get better sleep. By becoming an observer of our baby, um, and really like striving to know them, we're also going to build connection and trust, which can only help us as we continue down our parenting journey, whether we're talking about sleep or something else. Okay. And for the bedtime routine, this is kind of my go-to bedtime routine. If you have a bedtime routine, that's great. Stick with it. If you don't have a bedtime routine, this is a really good starting place and you can add things in as you go. But a good bedtime routine is the most powerful sleep association because it preps your child to be ready to sleep. And when you time it so you're setting them down awake and calm, it's giving them practice to do that at just the right time. So they build up that skill. And even when it's not perfect, they have that confidence and they know how to get to sleep on their own. So yeah, this is my go-to bedtime routine. Definitely great for that first year, even up to 18 months. And then as they get older, you'll want to lengthen it and make sure you're getting plenty of connection time and wind down time before setting them in their sleep space. Bath, we start with bath every night. I know a lot of people don't want to do a bath every night, and that's totally fine. Excuse me. One of the benefits to a bath is that it actually lowers the core body temperature a bit because it pulls heat out to the extremities, which actually promotes sleep. So if you're working on sleep, I like trying a bath for, a couple weeks to see if it helps. And then also you don't have to like wash them every night. Like we just give my daughter a chance to splash around. She's 2.5 now, but like just having that sensory bath time really helps her. Okay, and then after bath, you're gonna do diaper, PJs, sleep sack, and then you're gonna do a bottle or nurse, and you're gonna keep the lights on for this. After that, you're gonna do a book, a song, some snuggles, dim the lights, and then put them in their bed, calm and awake, and not too drowsy. That's kind of a really important piece to this whole puzzle is putting them in their bed, not too drowsy. After that, you're going to turn the lights off, sound machine on, and close the door or stay with them until they're asleep. I'm going to talk about a few more holistic sleep training methods. I often get people asking me what other sleep training options there are besides Cry It Out, and these are my go-to methods. I hope it doesn't feel like I'm rushing these too much, but there's a lot to get through, and I know it won't apply to everyone here, so I want to just be mindful of respecting everyone's time. Feel free to take screenshots or notes as we go, and we'll be coming up on our question and answer time here soon, so feel free to ask questions either in the chat as I go or at the end. All right, so the first one is called Shush Pat, and this method is more of a gradual parent present approach. It typically takes a little bit longer, but it's still super effective. In this method, parents are just gradually withdrawing the amount of support they're giving. So they remain in the child's room and comfort them to soothe them, but the child learns how to fall asleep on their own. It's most effective with younger babies, typically under 6 months, but in certain situations can work well for like up to 9 months or so. So the method is very simple. You will do your bedtime routine, put your baby in their crib, calm and awake. Then you're going to stay right there next to your baby's crib. And if they start to cry, you're going to rub their back, or pat their bottom, and shush loudly to help soothe them. Once they're calm, you're going to stop all of the hands-on support and just stand there. Yeah, you're going to repeat that process until they fall asleep. And it's really important that they're actually falling asleep without that hands-on support, because otherwise it's just becoming another sleep association that they're going to need you to help with. And then you would repeat this same exact process for all middle of the night waking, which is anything before 6 a.m. I mentioned earlier that this one can take a long time. And it can be frustrating in the middle of the night because it is so hands-on and you're tired and you are going to be tempted to just pick that baby up and help them get back to sleep the way that you've been doing. But if you stay strong and just think about gradually withdrawing support, you're going to see a lot more success. The next one is called check and console, and this is similar to a Ferber method. It's a form of graduated extinction, which usually involves some crying for a few nights with planned check-ins. But because of the way we're handling the crying, it tends to be less overall than there might be with a more hands-on approach. This method typically works really quickly, and it's an easy method for caregivers to stay consistent with. And it usually works best with babies 4 or 5 months to 24 months. So here it is. And again, feel free to screenshot any of this that you need to. You'll do your bedtime routine, put your baby in their crib, calm and awake, just like the last one. And then you're going to turn the lights out, leave the room, but listen, watch, and observe. Step 2 is to wait. If your baby starts crying hard, set your timer for 5, 10, or 15 minutes. The older the baby, the longer you're going to want to give them to try to work it out on their own. Step 3 is listen and assess. If your baby begins to de-escalate or pause, even just for a moment, you're going to restart your timer. When it appears that they're trying to get to sleep and they're not just freaking out anymore, stop your timer altogether. And then if they get worked up again, you'll restart it. Step 4 is to implement check-in. So if your baby is really, truly upset, they're not trying to fall asleep, they're just really mad that you're changing the way, you're changing everything up on them. You're going to go in and check on them, offer some physical comfort, make sure they don't need a new diaper, etc. You're going to keep that check-in pretty brief, like under 2 minutes, and you're going to avoid picking them up if you can, because often it will just make them even more mad. And then you'll leave the room, tell them you love them, leave the room, and continue that until they're asleep. And then step 5 is that you're going to repeat that same process for all middle of the night wakings and anything before 6 a.m. unless you're not night weaning, unless you're planning on continuing a feed or 2 overnight. And if you're comfortable giving closer to 20 minutes before implementing a check-in for middle of the night wakings, this can be really helpful because most babies, once they've had that practice at bedtime, will likely get back to sleep within 20 minutes without a check-in. So not everyone's comfortable with that, and that's fine. It can be really hard in the moment, but if you're comfortable, it's worth a try. And then the final method I want to talk about is called the chair method. This method is very gradual and allows parents to gently offer less support over time, similar to the shush pat method in that it's just a gradual withdrawing of support. The parent begins right by their child's crib or bed, and after the child has practice and gains confidence, for a few nights, the parent moves their chair further back. It can be challenging to stay consistent and really hold that boundary, and it can feel like progress is slow, but holding the boundary is key to success with this plan. And once the parent moves out of the room, outside of the child's room, everything moves more quickly with this. And it's a good option for children who are 6 months old, like even through the toddler preschool years. So here's the method. Your bedtime routine, put your baby in their crib or bed calm and awake, and then you're going to gradually back off on support over the next 2 to 3 weeks is usually how long it takes. So phase one is usually about 3 nights, and you're going to sit right next to your child's crib and offer intermittent physical or verbal comfort. So maybe you're rubbing their back every once in a while, or shushing, or telling them you love them, whatever it is, but it has to be intermittent. And just like with Shush Pat, you want them to fall asleep when you're not offering that physical or verbal comfort. Phase two is usually also about 3 nights. You're going to move your chair halfway to the door. You still may be offering occasional comfort, but it should be less and less every day. Because at this point, if you're offering that physical and verbal comfort, you're like getting out of your chair, going over to their bed, and that can be confusing for them. But sometimes they may really need it. So use your discretion and your knowledge of your own child as you make these decisions with this method. Phase three is that you're going to move your chair all the way to the door, but still inside the room. Only offer that physical and verbal comfort if it's absolutely necessary. Phase four, also about 3 nights, move your chair outside the door, but leave the door open. Sometimes parents like to just have their foot visible from the bed, or they'll just explain to their child that they're going to be right there. So that's up to you. And again, use your knowledge of your child as you're making those decisions. And then phase five is that you're going to move your chair outside the door and close it. So it can help sometimes to put a little piece of tape on the floor to show your child before bedtime, so they can kind of picture where you're going to be, especially if we're talking about older children. And then after this, I like to implement check and console during this last phase, or check-ins as needed. But at this point, they should be pretty much falling asleep on their own, like by the end of every phase. So that last step out the door shouldn't be too dramatic for them. And then for middle of the night, you're going to return to that same chair position where you were at bedtime, and remain there until your child is asleep. And again, if you feel comfortable, it can be helpful to give your child 10 to 20 minutes in the middle of the night to fall asleep on their own, because they might surprise you. Just like Shush Pat, this one can be harder to stick with in the middle of the night because you're tired and it takes longer and you just want to go to sleep. So just as you're thinking about your sleep training options, just keep that in mind as well. All right. So before we open it up to Q&A, I just want to tell you about my one-on-one program. This program is for people who are looking for that extra support to really tackle their sleep issues for good. If your child has struggled with falling asleep and staying asleep for a long time, and you suspect that it's more than just a bump in the road or a sleep regression, if they need you to rock them to sleep or nurse them to sleep or hold them to sleep every nap, every nighttime, over and over again, that's what this program is designed to help you fix, and to overcome those sleep issues for good. And we do that by teaching your child how to fall asleep on their own without your help, using those sleep training methods that I just talked about, coming back to those 3 sleep pillars that I talked about earlier. And then, I help you just really zero in on that schedule and get to the root of the problem. I customize every plan to your specific family and situation and your child and your parenting preferences. If this sounds like the support you've been looking for, I just want you to imagine just being able to put your child in their bed awake after a nice, sweet bedtime routine, and just being able to close the door and trusting that they will be able to confidently fall asleep on their own. and sleep all night long or only wake up for one feeding or whatever your goals are. It can be so life-changing, and I love being able to help parents learn how to help their children sleep and how to get more sleep for themselves as well. So, I don't want any mom suffering in silence. I know this is such a big issue and it can feel really personal to ask for help in this area. But if you need support, I want you to reach out. If you decide that you want some more support, this is kind of the process. You would book a discovery call just to see if it's a good fit to work together. And then there's a detailed sleep assessment that you'll fill out. And from that, I'll create your customized sleep plan. We'll do a kickoff call so you feel super prepared and confident going into that first night. And then there's 3 weeks of one-on-one tech support. And then at the end of these 3 weeks, you can expect that your child will fall asleep on their own at bedtime and then back to sleep on their own throughout the night. Your daytime schedule will be improved, naps will be better, and your whole family will be feeling more well rested.
If you feel like you're ready to get that next level of support, if you feel like you hit a regression and really need some help to get through it or overcome it or recover from it, that's what my 3-week one-on-one coaching program is for. We'll get super in-depth. I'll be there every step of the way to help support you. And this investment is $625, and I can do payment plans if that's helpful. And I just love walking with parents through this time that can be really stressful, and there's lots of questions and lots of variables. So I love coming alongside you and helping you through that so that we can get you and your family and your baby more sleep as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, I love working with families on sleep. This is a passion that I didn't know I had until I began this work, and I would love to help you if you feel like you need that extra support walking through this process. If you're ready to take that next step and you're ready to start having the conversation, feel free to book a discovery call with me here on my website, or you can send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at tunedin_new mom coach. And I would love to have a no pressure conversation about how I can help you.